My friends, let me ask you something right away. At what point does empathy turn into self-betrayal? And more importantly, does being pregnant magically erase every terrible thing you've done? Because today's story sits right at that uncomfortable intersection where family loyalty, betrayal, and moral judgment collide. And trust me, this one gets messy fast. My friends, this is Scarlet Veil. Welcome to the Channeling Whispers, where secrets don't stay buried, family drama gets dragged into the light, and we ask the questions everyone else is too polite to say out loud. Before we begin, go ahead and grab a coffee, a glass of wine, or whatever emotional support beverage you prefer, and sit with me for this absolutely unhinged story. And yes, stay until the end, because you're going to have opinions. Oh, and don't forget, like, subscribe, share this with your most judgmental friend, because I already know the comments are going to be wild. This story came from the depths of the internet, dressed up as a simple question. AITA for kicking my pregnant sister out of my house after finding out who the father is? Simple question. Complicated answers. Let's meet our protagonist. Well, call her Claire. Claire was 36 years old, freshly divorced, emotionally exhausted, and finally starting to feel like herself again. Her marriage had ended 2 years earlier after a long stretch of quiet resentment, missed conversations, and the slow realization that love alone doesn't survive neglect. The divorce wasn't explosive. No screaming matches. No dramatic courtroom scenes. Just paperwork, empty rooms, and the kind of sadness that settles in your bones. Her ex-husband, Ethan, was firmly in the past. Or so she thought. Then one evening, there was a knock on her door. Standing there was her younger sister, Lena. Red eyes. Overpacked suitcase. That look people have when they already know they're about to ask for too much. I'm pregnant. Silence. Not the awkward kind. The heavy kind. Claire didn't scream. Didn't hug her. Didn't ask congratulations. She just nodded and said, "Are you okay?" Because at that moment, my friends, Claire still believed this was a normal family crisis. Temporary. Manageable. Lena explained she'd broken up with her boyfriend. She had nowhere to go. She just needed a temporary place to stay while she figured things out. Temporary. That word always shows up right before disaster. Claire hesitated. She knew her sister. Lena had a talent for chaos and a habit of landing on her feet usually after someone else cushioned the fall. But she was family. And she was pregnant. And society has opinions about women who say no to pregnant relatives. So Claire opened the door. The first few days were calm. Too calm. Lena settled into the guest room. Cried a lot. Slept late. Ate very specific cravings at very inconvenient hours. Claire adjusted, bought prenatal vitamins, kept the fridge stocked, lowered the volume on her life. She was doing everything right, except something felt off. Every time Claire asked about the baby's father, Lena dodged the question. It's complicated. I don't want to talk about it. It doesn't matter. Which, my friends, is never what you say when things are normal. But Claire respected the silence. Because she didn't yet know that silence had a name, and a face, and a history she'd already lived through. One night, Claire came home late from work. Tired. Hungry. Emotionally drained. Lena was on the couch on the phone. Claire wasn't paying attention until she heard a name. Ethan. Yes. The ex-husband. Time froze. Lena's voice was soft. Familiar. Intimate. Claire didn't interrupt. She walked to her bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. Because nobody says their sister's ex-husband's name like that by accident. That night, sleep didn't come. Memories did. Lena laughing too hard at Ethan's jokes during family dinners. Lena defending him when Claire complained. Lena texting him long after the divorce, just to check in. Suddenly, The puzzle pieces clicked into place, forming a picture Claire never wanted to see. The next morning, Claire didn't dance around it. Is Ethan the father? Lena went quiet. Her hands shook. Her eyes dropped. Answer enough. It wasn't planned, Lena whispered. It just happened.
Ah, yes.
The classic defense. Claire felt sick.
When?
Before the divorce. And just like that, the ground disappeared beneath her feet. Because this wasn't just betrayal. This was betrayal with a timestamp. Her marriage hadn't just failed. It had been undermined from inside her own family. Claire didn't yell. She didn't cry. She went numb. And Lena, bless her timing, said the sentence that changed everything. You can't kick me out. I'm pregnant. There it was. The emotional immunity card. As if pregnancy automatically erased choice, responsibility, and consequence. Claire looked at her sister, really looked at her. You're pregnant, she said. You're not untouchable. And that, my friends, is where the question officially began. AITA? Was Claire heartless for wanting her space back? Or was Lena hiding behind a pregnancy to avoid accountability?
Claire didn't throw her out that day.
She didn't scream. She didn't humiliate her. But she did say this. I can't live like this. And the family? Oh, they had opinions.
Calls.
Texts. Voicemails full of guilt and obligation. She's your sister. The baby didn't do anything wrong. Be the bigger person. Funny how be the bigger person always means endure the pain quietly. Because no one ever asks the person who caused the damage to grow. They ask the wounded one to shrink. The messages didn't stop. Claire's mother called first. Her voice was calm in that dangerous way that pretends to be neutral but already picked a side.
She's scared, she said.
She needs support. This isn't the time to make things about you.
About you.
Claire almost laughed. Because somehow, her divorce, her betrayal, her home, her mental health, all of it had been neatly categorized as secondary. Background noise to the real headline. Pregnant woman in distress. Claire didn't argue. She listened. She thanked her mother for calling. And then she did something radical. She said nothing. Inside the house, the atmosphere shifted. Lena stopped pretending everything was fine. She cried louder, moved slower, sighed dramatically whenever Claire entered the room. The guilt was no longer subtle, it was strategic. One afternoon, Lena sat at the kitchen table, hands folded over her stomach, staring into nothing. I don't know how I'm going to do this alone, she said softly. Claire opened the fridge, closed it, took a breath. You weren't alone when you made those choices, she replied. Silence. That silence was sharp. That night, Ethan resurfaced. This time, with a text message long enough to qualify as a short essay. He apologized. Sort of. He said things like, I never meant for this to hurt you. I was confused. We didn't plan it. As if betrayal was weather. As if people just accidentally fall into each other for months. Claire read the message once. Then she blocked his number. Because closure doesn't come from conversations with people who already chose themselves. Days passed. Claire felt like a guest in her own life. She tiptoed. She swallowed words. She found herself staying later at work just to avoid going home. And that's when it hit her. This wasn't temporary. This was erosion. Little by little, her sister's presence was rewriting the rules of her own space. And Claire was disappearing inside it. The breaking point didn't come with shouting. It came quietly. One evening, Claire overheard Lena on the phone again. I know, Lena whispered. I miss you too. Claire didn't need to hear the name this time. Her chest tightened. And in that moment, something clicked, not angrily, not dramatically, but clearly. She couldn't heal in the same space where the betrayal lived. The next morning, Claire made coffee. Sat at the table. Waited. When Lena walked in, Claire didn't soften her voice. I need you to find another place to stay, she said. It'll give you a week. Lena froze. A week? You're kicking me out? "I'm asking you to leave," Claire replied. "There's a difference." Lena's eyes filled instantly. "Impregnant," she repeated,
As if it were a spell.
as if it erased everything else. Claire finally looked directly at her. "And you're still responsible for your actions." That's when Lena snapped. She accused Claire of being cold, of punishing her, of choosing bitterness over family. The words came fast,
Sharp.
designed to wound, and Claire felt at the urge to backtrack,
To apologize.
to absorb the pain and call it love. But she didn't. The family reaction was immediate, explosive. Her phone buzzed nonstop. "She's carrying your niece. You'll regret this. How can you live with yourself?" No one asked how Claire had been living before this. No one asked how it felt to realize her marriage had collapsed with her sister inside it. No one asked how it felt to wake up every day and share walls with betrayal. Lena left 3 days later. Not quietly. There were tears, accusations, a final line thrown over her shoulder like a grenade. "I hope you're happy." Claire closed the door behind her, and then she sat on the floor and cried, not because Lena was gone, but because she could finally breathe. The house was silent again. Painful silence. Healing silence. Claire slept through the night for the first time in weeks. She stopped flinching at notifications, stopped dreading her own living room. And slowly, something unexpected happened. The guilt faded. Weeks passed. The baby was born. Photos appeared in the family chat. Comments full of hearts and congratulations. Claire didn't comment. Not out of cruelty. Out of clarity. Because she had learned something the hard way. You can wish someone well, without sacrificing yourself at the altar of their choices. Some relatives still call her heartless. Some say she'll understand one day. Maybe she will. Maybe she won't. But Claire stopped asking herself how to be smaller for everyone else. Instead, she asked one question, the same one that started it all. "AITA?" And this time her answer didn't come from the internet. It came from peace. So now I ask you, my friends, would you have let her stay? Would you have swallowed the betrayal for the sake of family harmony? Or would you have done the unthinkable and chosen yourself? Drop it in the comments.
Argue.
Disagree. Confess. Because the line between compassion and self-destruction is thinner than we like to admit. And sometimes, the villain is just the person who finally said enough.